Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Kansept Deadite, which is designed by Jeff Blauvelt of Tuff Knives. This is based on his custom that goes by the same name, apparently. I didn't realize that he had that custom, but I'm a big fan of Tuff Knives and his designs, specifically his breaker, like his custom breaker design is something that I've really enjoyed the aesthetic of for a long time, but I'm not familiar with all of his models. Either way, I suggest that you follow him on Instagram. He's got a number of different production designs out there that people tend to really like, and he's also designed a lot of stuff that you might not have realized from a while back. Anyways, this knife is available, and I'll link it down in the description. It does help my channel when you use those links, but that's up to you. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Thanks to Kansept for sending this in if I didn't already say so. Let's go ahead and get a measurement. This is a full-size knife. Overall length is coming in at about 8 1/8. Yeah, blade length 3.5 inches. Cutting edge, just shy. It's like 3.45, 3.485. Really close. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom skills you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and Others. Up against the 80-10 and the Hogue Deca, for some reason, we'll bring that one back here. Up against the 80-20.5. Yeah, it looks like a full-size knife. It's not incredibly bulky. It's definitely longer and bigger than something like the 80-20.5. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Roughly the same overall size as the PM2, just with more cutting edge. Let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. It's probably most similar in terms of hand space, blade length, and cutting edge length to the Hogue Deca. How's the action? This is a Kansept knife, and Kansept does a good job. They typically like to stay in the 150 to 250 range, and I feel like they usually nail it down. Like the build quality and what you're getting for the money usually feels pretty darn good, and this is right there with that. There's a couple of little things, and we'll talk about them, but when it comes to action, Kansept, sometimes like their knives feel a little bit tight, and then they break in. Honestly, what it feels like is like, for those of you who remember, like when WE knives first hit the scene, all the way up until like 2020, 2021, I think the first big change that I felt from WE knives was in 2022. But a lot of their knives, same with Riot knives, a lot of them just come tight out of the box, and then they slowly break in. It's not bad. It doesn't feel like a bad, crunchy, you know, when you get a knife that's got like crunchy, you know, it's like right before they packaged it, someone was like, and here's some sand for the pivot for some reason, right? It doesn't feel like that. It just feels a little tight. But this knife in particular, while it still kind of feels like that, I'm sure that it will break in. The pivot's nice and smooth. The flipping action is really good. And that's, I think, partially, I think that this is going to be really subjective, but I like a knife that has a heavier detent and that has a flipper tab that allows me to push button open it, right? Now this fortunately allows you to light switch it or push button it, but this knife has a detent that is very preferable to me. It's on the heavier side. It's not mega heavy. It's like specifically, but like on the heaviness scale 1 to 10, I'd probably give it a 7.5, you know, maybe a 7, but it feels good. Like the flipper tab, every time I go to flip it, like it just feels nice. The lock bar tension also is pretty heavy, so I think that's like definitely contributing to it. So disengaging it, it's not necessarily that this edge is sharp. It's that your fingers pushing against that angle really hard to move a lock bar over that's got some pretty heavy tension on it, right? So it's not bad in the, you know, disengagement area. It's just a little heavy, a little heavily pressurized, but the flipper tab is awesome. So it does feel good. I do enjoy flipping this knife. It makes me think of like the first time that I flipped a zero tolerance knife and thought, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, it kind of feels that way. You would think that this would be like a perfect formula for every company nowadays, but there are still knives that stand out, you know. So it feels good. I like the action, but I think some people might find it a little heavy for their tastes. Let's do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's actually not really all that thick. It's also contoured, which, you know, sometimes I get on Wii knives for this. I know that it's more expensive to contour titanium than it is to just mill it flat. And Wii has a lot of knives in their lineup that are like $350 that are no more complicated than this, but flat. This is nowhere near $350. So, you know, what I mean there is you can see that the titanium is actually curved. It's not flat up here. It's got some bevels and things, but it's not flat. So it's nice that they're able to do that. But anyways, we were doing carry profile. The knife does, you know, feel like a full-size knife. Like you put it in your pocket, you're going to be aware, like I'm carrying a full-size knife that's got a lot of titanium on it. So if you're, you know, used to carrying a full-size knife that's right around the 8.25 inch mark, it's not going to be anything new to you. If you're used to carrying a smaller knife, this is going to feel pretty heavy, right? Materials, we have the lava flow carbon fiber, but you don't have to go with that. They've got a few different options, including just like a basic carbon fiber and like black titanium. And then we have the bronze titanium here, bronze titanium pocket clip, blackened bag spacer, which is also titanium, and then an S35VN blade. Let's go ahead and weigh it, which, oh, there's my scale right there. The weight on this guy, I doubt there's any milling for weight reduction. No, I'm going to guess that this weighs over 5 ounces. Maybe I'm wrong. I am wrong. It only weighs 4.4 ounces. It feels heavy. The balance is actually right behind the pivot, though. I'm not sure exactly what it is that's making this feel heavy to me, but that's just my, you know, emotional response to have it in hand, I guess. 4.4 ounces, honestly, isn't bad at all. I think that the Ritter Hogue in G10 weighs the same or more, right? So, not bad. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can get them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. Somebody asked me in the comments to check and see if the pivot on this guy was free spinning. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Because we have adjustment heads on both sides. And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. That's annoying. Kansept here, this, I just off-centered it. Truthfully, this has been centered. I think I just messed it up. I just got this to loosen just enough to off-center it. But truthfully, this was centered to the best of my knowledge before I did that. But more importantly, Kansept and everybody, nobody wants to take 2 drivers to the pivot, right? I feel like Jeff knows this, so I feel like this was more of a Kansept thing. Kansept, D-shaped pivot barrels. Or cylindrical pivot barrel, mill the captive pivot zone into the titanium. And then the cap for the pivot can just match that, like a square or a triangle or whatever, right? A big D, something to keep it captive so that we only have to adjust one side. It's just annoying to have to use 2. It's not, I mean, for me, it's not a deal breaker. For some people, it is, right? But to get this pivot undone, I got to have 2 drivers and do this, which sucks, right? So please, captive pivots. It's 2025. The body screws are T6, so I wish they were T8, but they're not. It's not that big of a deal. As long as you have the right tools for the job, you should be good to go. Honestly, pretty simple construction. Really, you know, maintaining this knife won't be that hard outside of having to use 2 drivers to adjust the pivot. So we weighed it. Did we measure the blade stock? I don't think we did. Let's go ahead and do that. So the blade stock thickness on this knife is coming in at not thick at all. Is that really 115 thousandths? That's much thinner than I thought it was going to be. Let's check that again. Yeah, it doesn't really appear all that thick. Yeah, this knife has really thrown me for a loop. It's only 115 thousandths, so not a thick knife. Okay, meat and potatoes time. Do you like the blade to handle ratio of this? When you have, and this, again, this is very subjective, but when you have a blade that's a near 1-to-1 ratio to the handle, I find that they look a lot more pleasing. Some knives do not have the same ratios, and they're also odd shapes, and they tend to look a little bit ugly. It's not just Spyderco, right? Demcos have that thing too, right? Some people don't care. This is prioritizing ergonomic comfort and options over the aesthetic, right? This is prioritizing the aesthetic. It still has, plenty of a good ergonomic grip on it, right? Not the most comfortable in the entire world. It's good enough. This is contoured, and I think he did a pretty good job about knocking down the edges, right? Right up against this flipper tab, this is curved, so it feels pretty good. Everything feels pretty good. It doesn't feel perfect. This area back here is a little bit of an angle, right? Feels pretty good. I'd give it a B+, right? I can feel the pocket clip. It's milled. It's raised. The tip of the pocket clip is pretty sharp. I don't feel that while I'm, if I'm cutting and my hand is like coming down and this pokes upward and into my hand, I might feel it a little bit, right? I'm just aware that the pocket clip is there. It's just raised and it's a big milled clip. But ergonomically, it's pretty good. It's not, oh my gosh, hand melting. It's not like a Strider experience or a Spyderco Shaman experience, but it's pretty good. So I can't be too upset. I do appreciate right here. This is an area that is missed so often. Like when we do, companies will do a flipper tab, and that flipper tab will either be 90 degrees or it'll be angled down. And so you come up here to get behind the blade and you're like, ouch, the thing is like attacking my finger. This is nice. This follows a consistent curvature and it's knocked down right there. You can see he didn't jimp underneath this, right? It's nice. I appreciate that. No jimping up here. It's a little weird. I feel like there should be, but there's not, so okay. I do like, it's so heavy you will miss that sometimes. I did just there, even knowing, right? So just be aware of that. We didn't talk about the thumb studs. Thumb studs very much remind me not only the way that they look, but where they're placed, right? In terms of like how you deploy the knife. Like, look at this. They're super similar to Rick Hinder studs. Like, they're not identical, but man, they are close. And the angle that you deploy an XM, it's a little funky because the primary purpose of those is as external stops. And then they're also textured so that you can use them. But instead of pushing up, as you typically do, right? Like something that's got thumb stud, like the Ritter Hogue has a thumb stud that is optimized purely for deployment because it has no second function. With these, you push them out. So my thumb will go more this way, right? It's fine if you know to do that. If you don't know to do that, you're going to really fight this. You're going to get this and go, I want to deploy. Because you got to go more this way. And you also have to make sure your finger's not on the lock bar, right? So it's going to be a little bit tricky, but just be aware of that. So anyways, the blade looks cool. It's kind of I guess it's kind of a trailing point with a subtle tanto. You will 2 to 3 sharpenings and that'll be gone. It'll just be a continuous, and I think that's fine. Jeff has a lot of, like his custom breaker is like this very subtle tanto where the change is right here in the middle. So this edge is straight and then we have curvature out here. What's the benefit of that? I have no idea. I'm not sure that there is one. It looks cool, right? But I think technically we call this a tanto. Or do we have to get special with it? Do we have to call it a modified trailing Persian, Octopus Tuesday high five surprise? Like what do we call this? But it is cool. It looks nice. Kansept does a good job with their tumbled finish. They love to put crap all over the blade. They put the logo. They put K1081A4. S35EN is fine. The Tuff Knives logo is fine. We also, for some reason, have to put the name of the knife in the most basic, like, HR font. Why do we have to put that on there? And then there's also, like, what is this? It's the number of the run. Okay, so the number of the run, put it on the inside of the frame, right? If the Deadite doesn't need to be there. We bought it. We know what it's called. This code, again, put it on the inside of the frame. Put it on the inside of the blade underneath the frame. If it absolutely has to be there, right? I can understand you want your logo. Make it smaller. Back it up over. If you don't have this code here, put the Kansept logo back here and make it smaller. S35VN is fine where you have it. Tuff Knives logo probably also could be moved back over here, right? But geez, there's so much stuff on the blade. Kansept Knives has always been like this. I don't know why, but they are. They probably won't change it. I'll probably keep pointing out that it's annoying, right? The blade, thinner than I thought. It cuts like it's somewhat thick. I'll show you just cutting a piece of printer paper. It's fine. It'll do what you want it to do. And this will get better as you sharpen it. You know, if you're gonna, you know, use this as your dedicated tool, you're gonna sharpen it to the angle that you want, right? So it might get better. Out of the box, yeah, the edge is plenty sharp, slicey, but it does cut like a thicker geometry, and I think it is, right? Even with the stock not being incredibly thick to begin with, the flat is much more towards the middle of the blade, and so the taper is not super aggressive down to the cutting edge, and it ends up with kind of a medium, I wouldn't call it a thick edge, just kind of a medium edge, but it is sharp, and the bevel is consistent all the way out to the tip on both sides. If you are going to dedicate to this knife, or this knife is just a couple of other knives and you're going to use them a lot and you're going to have to sharpen a lot as a result of that usage, then you're going to want to pay attention to the plunge grind, which might cause a little bit of a smile after a few sharpenings, but some people don't really care about that. I'll let you make up your mind for yourself. This doesn't look too bad to me, but I'm not the best judge because I have a lot of knives and I carry them pretty casually, right? So there you go. There's a good look at that plunge grind there. Let's see. I do like the look. We have a lot of knives with this kind of like, here's the titanium parts, kind of the faux bolster. We got the scale back here. There's an error with this knife that is not typical of Kansept knives. Not super typical. I see it every now and then, but just understand, I handle a lot of Kansept knives. Sometimes they send me what seems to be their entire seasonal line. I mean, it's not uncommon for me to get a box from Kansept that's got like 8 knives in it. Usually, I would say usually, their fit and finish is pretty darn good. You know, here and there's a couple little tiny goofy little things. Nothing too crazy. Usually with inlay stuff, transition from one material to another, they're pretty good, right? This has got a pretty big goof up on it. This particular scale, and I thought maybe I just need to tighten this down. No, it's just warped a bit, or it's cut to not be flush. You can see it right there. It's lipped, right? On this side, transition's good, right? This is the frame lock. So this, we're talking about from this titanium to here, right? Not looking at the lock bar, because the lock bar moves in and out and away from this overlay, right? But over here, the transition is not good. There's a lip there. So that's a bummer, and I'm going to point that out. But Kansept doesn't typically, not in my experience, right? We're still going to have people in the comments going, I have a Kansept that's terrible. But yeah, people are going to be loud when something's not right, you know? But I'm just letting you know, I'm not saying that my opinion is more valid. I'm saying I have factually handled a ridiculous number of Kansept knives. So I've got a good, you know, data pool to pull from. It's not typical. But this isn't great. So Kansept, you guys got to watch that stuff. Like, this should be a smooth, perfect, or near perfect transition at this price point. Absolutely, right? I mean, it's hardly excusable at the $50 price point when you're going to do it. It's definitely not excusable at the $200 price point. So we got to make sure that those are essentially perfect. There's no lanyard hole. Who cares? Some people do. I don't. Most people don't, right? If you do, well, sorry, there's no lanyard hole. This also does not have a spot for a lefty-mounted pocket clip. It's just right-handed, so sorry, left-handed people. The pocket clip, honestly, in and out of the pocket is just fine. There's a nice, you know, kind of non-aggressive lump underneath that pocket clip. There's plenty of rise. The retention on it is medium. It's not crazy. Sorry, it's super cold, so the doggos are in the inside kennel with the heat lamp today. So they're out there getting irritated at each other. The tip of that is just a tad sharp. Could have been knocked down a bit, but it's fine. Carrying this knife is very easy. We have a steel lock bar insert, which is typical. That's what we want to see. No blade play up, down, left, or right. I'm going to let you guys look at the lockup percentage, which, by the way, is solid. Kansept knows how to make a titanium frame lock. I don't require that the spine of my blade or the lock of my knife can stand up to much more than what I just did there. So I don't do crazy abusive testing because I think it's nonsense. But if you treat your knives a lot harder and you would require a stronger locking system, then you should get one. I'm going to use this as a knife. So I'm going to want it to cut, right? The Cold Steel Triad lock exists, Scorpion lock, Demco Shark lock, Sneck Super lock. There's lots of knives to pick from if you really need that level of durability in your pocket knife. I don't think the average person does, so a frame lock is going to be just fine for me. In fact, a frame lock tends to be pretty darn strong. I mean, can see here, it's not disengaging. And while you're holding on to it, you're going to be holding that lock in place anyway. So this is perfectly fine. If you plan on prying or screwing with your pocket knife, my best advice to you is don't, because that's not what it's made for. Use a screwdriver, a pry bar, or hammer, or whatever the appropriate tool is, and then when you happen upon a cutting task, well, you have a knife with a blade that's sharp, as long as you haven't been using it for prying, hammering, or screwing. So yeah, I would say use your best judgment. But anyways, I know people are like, his sarcasm turns me off a little bit. That kind of bothers me. Anyways, no blade play up, down, left to right, no lock stick. Actually, there's a little teeny tiny bit. It'll probably work itself out. There's a little tiny bit, little bitty bit. No double clutch, no pivot lash. Smooth and consistent in here. No bumps, no lumps, no grits. Heavy D10. I like it. It's off-centered, but I think that was me. So most of the time, Kansept does come centered. Every now and then they are off-centered, right? And that's the same with every company. This is when I say stuff like that, people like to go, that's why I buy a Benchmade, or that's why I buy a Kershaw, or that's why I buy, literally insert any company. As somebody who has handled thousands of knives from all of your favorite companies, I can tell you with confidence that no company is immune to off-centering. Some companies are, you see it more often, but everybody, even Chris Reeve knives, I've ordered brand new Chris Reeve knives that have come off-centered. All of them, So I don't like to see it, but typically Kansept is far from the worst offender. This one, even if it did, arrive with me off-centered and it wasn't me who did that, I would say it's pretty unlikely. But my stance on that is that it's 2025. I don't care if your knife costs $30 or it costs $10,000. The thing better come with a centered blade. So anyways, what's the price on this guy? So technically the base price is $189, but that version is the Damascus version. It is not Damasteel. The Damascus they use is a 9CR, 10CR combination, which is fine. It will probably perform something like VG10, which is fine, right? But I think S35VN, which is the steel here, is a better choice for performance. So unless you just really want the Damascus, right, we're looking at a base price of $199, which is fair. I want it to be centered. I don't want it to have a free spinning pivot. I want your transition from titanium to carbon fiber to be better. But typically, we don't see this with the bad transition, and we don't see bad centering. So I'm not going to quite count them off of that. The free spinning pivot thing is super annoying. No company, there's no excuse for this. We want to adjust one side. We do not want to adjust both sides. Just stop that. It's silly. But $200 is a fair price for this. And we see companies like Kansept and Kaiser specifically really doing a good job delivering on not only materials, but functionality and overall execution at this $200 price point. And then we have other companies who are essentially making the same thing with a little bit more flash. Maybe it's a little smoother out of the box, right? But they charge like $350 for it, right? So, yeah, I think this is a pretty good value. And I do like this knife. Generally speaking, I think it's pretty recommendable. It's not going to be everybody's favorite thing in the world, and there's definitely room for improvement. And I think that's a kind of across the board for Kansept, but they're doing a pretty good job. And I think this is a pretty good example of what they're capable of. So I'm going to put this in my recommended knives playlist, but if I start hearing that like all of these have inlay issues, well then, maybe not. So, but I'll keep my eyes on Kansept. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.